Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 790. My opponent started off with e4 and I went with e6, the French defense. And then he played knight f3, which you see is pretty far down the list, although recently I've seen this quite a bit. It's kind of a funny thing. I'm not sure why people are playing that all of a sudden. If you want to, in this game, for example, we transposed into the exchange variation, which you can just continue with d4 and get into the exchange variation that way if that's what you want to play. Knight f3 gives some more options to black. So after knight f3, I could play c5 here and transpose into one of the e6 Sicilians, a Taimanov or a Khan Sicilian. But if I wanted to play a Sicilian, I would have started with c5. So I went with the d5 move. And we can see that e5 would transpose into an advanced French most likely, or e takes d5 would transpose into an exchange variation. Looks like knight c3 is the most common try from white here at this point, and then knight f6. I wonder where this leads to. e5, yeah, so it still leads to kind of a French position, although with this knight in front of the c pawn. Anyway, yeah, I don't think this is so great for white. I'm not sure why it is suddenly so popular, but I have to say I am seeing it quite a bit. And also after d5, what I usually see is what my opponent played, the exchange. So we've just transposed into an exchange French after he plays d4. And you'll notice, if you look at the numbers over here, this position, there's only 13 instances in the database, but after I take and white plays d4, we're up to 340. So we've transposed back into a mainline exchange French. And now knight f6 is the most common move, but I think bishop d6 and knight f6 can be basically played in any order. And then he went knight c3 here, which is unusual for an exchange French. Usually white wants to put his bishop on d3, and I want to put my knight on f6, and we both castle, and that leads to an exchange, a very typical exchange position, exchange French position. Anyway, if white wants to play more dynamically, white can throw in the move c4. That's an interesting way to play. But knight c3, I think, maybe is a bit of a mistake, blocking in this pawn, although objectively it still seems to be okay. What's surprising to me here is that c6 is not the most popular move. I looked at this knight f6 line a little bit because I was trying to understand what happens after knight b5. So I just checked this out. I mean, we're no longer in the opening book, but I checked it out with the chess engine, and it just goes like this. So basically black just gives up the bishop pair for no particular reason. Well, I can't say no reason. There's black has castle and then has two pieces developed. So black has given up the bishop pair and gained a move or two in development. But it seems like there's no particular trouble for black here either. Black is going to develop the bishop and castle, and there's no pawn weaknesses. Everything's symmetric. So I can't believe this is that great somehow. Anyway, let's go back to the game. So yeah, so I played the move c6 to stop the knight from coming into b5. He goes bishop d3, knight f6. You see, we got back into more of a mainline position. Bishop g5. I castle. He castles. So we kind of are wandering in and out of the opening book. But right here, my knight bd7 move, we're definitely out of the opening book after that. Bishop g4 is the most common move here, and I have to say, based on what happened in the game, I think that's probably the better move. I mean, it's always a concern when you develop the knight here that you're blocking in the bishop. I just thought the knight was going to be moving again pretty soon, and then the bishop would come out, but it would seem to be a bit awkward, so I think I would go with bishop g4 instead of this move, knight bd7. Although this is still in the range of about even. We're just out of the opening book here. Goes rook e1, go h6, kicking the bishop. Bishop drop back. Go rook e8. Opposing his rook on the e file. I would like to put a knight on e4 if I get the chance. And he actually lets me because he plays knight e2 here, so that takes the pressure off the e4 square. But first I wanted to unpin the knight. Can't move there immediately, so queen b6. And it's hitting the b pawn, so he played b3 here. And now I got my knight to e4 in. and he goes c4, undermining the knight. So I think that was a good move. The chess engine thinks I'm still fine here with the correct play. So all of this, up to this point, the position has been about equal. But I make a mistake in the next couple of moves, and white gets some kind of advantage. So the way to keep this equal, maybe even good for black, is bishop b4, kicking that rook. I think I didn't appreciate the value of this, controlling the e1 square, because then I can, keep my rook on e8 and have ideas of opening the e file in my favor. So that would be a nice way to play. And then knight d to f6, opening up the bishop, and seems like all of my opening problems have been solved at this point. So that was the way to play it. Obviously I was concerned about this fork, so that's one way to handle that. I played a different way. I played with taking and then with c5. And once again, bishop b4 would have been a better move. So here, white has an edge, and he played knight g3, which is one way to put pressure on the knight. It turns out, maybe not so obvious, but knight to c3 is a better way of putting pressure on the knight. I mean, it looks pretty similar, but, well, we saw in the game, knight to g3 blocks the retreat of this bishop, so it makes things just a little awkward for white. Although after knight g3, he still has an advantage, but he has a stronger advantage here. So anyway, just to show how it might continue at this point, my knight is under fire. He's just going to take it, and it's not so easy to defend. The best move here is to actually drop back and defend the rook, which is not defended, so I have to be careful about that. That allows him to exchange, and then hop in with this knight to d5. So that's one perk of the c3 move, is that you get to advance into this d5 square. And my queen, notice my queen has no good squares on this diagonal. The bishop controls that square, the knight controls that square, so I have to move my queen out here, which has its points. I mean, this can be a good square. I can open up the fourth rank by taking here, maybe in some cases. But overall, this is a position which is pretty advantageous to white. He's got better pieces. My bishop and knight are still in the back rank, and my rook is blocked in. So it's actually a pretty big edge to white in this position. So that would be best play. And I think with good play, white should probably go on to win that game. So I think that's probably a winning position. Anyway, he went with knight g3 with similar ideas. So once again, I have to drop my knight back and defend my rook. He traded. And then he played queen e2, so putting pressure. Well, my knight is undefended there, so I have to move it. So knight. I went knight d to f6. I wanted to open up that diagonal for my bishop, and then this also protects my knight. And if he takes, I can take back with the knight and still keep the e8 square guarded. So this is okay for me. And then he went d5. So this is the first point in the game at which I might have played g5, trapping his bishop. So better than d5 is the move knight to e4, and this is how white can keep the biggest advantage. And yeah, still white has the better pieces. The material is even, but my position is just awkward here, and I'm behind in development. Need to get the bishop off the back rank, get the rook into the game. So white has a significant edge here, although maybe I can hold on with good play. Who knows? But instead of knight e4, he went d5. And like I said, this gives me a chance to play g5, although in this particular case, he gets a pretty good attack going. So actually, Chess Engine still likes white here. So maybe it was good that I didn't play g5 immediately. He can take, and then let's see, I can bring my bishop out, kicking his queen, play f3, and bishop drops back to d7. And, so that was necessary, I guess, to prevent his queen from coming over here. Well, I couldn't get to that square, but maybe getting to the king's side more easily, maybe is the way to put it. Takes away the f3 square from the queen. I guess that's what's going on. My pieces are over here. At least the rook has got one of the pieces off the back rank, so it's starting to look at a few more squares. I can maybe move this knight here after this knight moves. And it's still going to be awkward for me to unwind, but I am a piece up. Anyway, the the chess engine gives white a slight edge here, not very much. So maybe it's about even, really. Well, I didn't play G4 right away. I didn't really think about it. I mean G5. I didn't play it right away. I didn't really think about it at this point because I wanted to get my pieces off the back rank, and I saw this good-looking pin here, so I played the bishop there, and then he went H3 to kick my bishop, and now I was very tempted to play this this G5 move, and I think it's the correct decision. Once again, instead of H3, he should have played knight to E4, just to get his knight out of the way. With the knight on E4, you know, his bishop is not getting trapped. His bishop can drop back to G3, and E4 is a good square for that knight anyway. So that's the way to play it. I would probably trade off the knight and bring the other knight into F6, but well, I'd have to be careful also that I don't lose material that way. Anyway, I went bishop G4. He went H3, and now I saw that I could play G5 here by just taking off that knight, and then after G5 he doesn't get 2 pawns, he only gets 1, at least immediately. There was a funny line here though. The chess engine says even better than taking is after taking it actually starts to like black. White stays in the game with this move, rook to B1, and then the queen needs to go to A6, which is not at all obvious, but I'll give you the line that shows why the queen should go to A6. Queen C7, a much more natural move, is probably what I would have played. Then he hops his knight into E4. He's threatening to take here. He's got 2 attackers, and I've only got it defended once, so I need to exchange out. And then he takes with the queen, threatening this pretty nasty check. So this kind of rescues the bishop. I have to play a move here, knight F6, to defend against that check. I'm hitting the queen though. Queen goes to F5, and then I can take, but then he can take the knight. So this is not so great for me. My pawn structure is messed up, and he got his piece back. So that's not at all good. So after rook B1, I have to go queen A6. And the idea is that at the end of that long line, you can imagine the queen sitting here on F6. I have the move bishop to H2 check. So my knight is really indirectly defended. So that's the way to play this. And this complicated position is about even, according to the chess engine. One other line here. You know, white might try to directly get to that kind of position by knight E4. Well, we can see the same thing happening. I take, he takes, I play knight F6, kicking his queen, defending against the check, queen here, and then I take the bishop. But now, once again, if the queen takes here, I have this bishop H2 check. So my knight is actually defended, and I stay a piece up. But anyway, those lines are slightly better than what he played. He played bishop takes G5 immediately, and this is probably white can still hold this with good play, but things are improving for me, and there's maybe a slight edge to black here. Let's see, he goes queen F5, and I just took on G3. I didn't want his knight coming into this square, putting more pressure on my knight, and you know, that would open things up for his queen if I had to trade it off. So I traded off this way. So he took the pawn with check, and then took the bishop with his queen. I guess he didn't want to mess up the pawns in front of his king. Although, you know, my queen is not really on that diagonal because I'm blocked by my own pawn. And if he had taken with the pawn directly, then he would have had the idea of rook over here to F1. So there's something to be said for just taking with the pawn there rather than with the queen, even after grabbing the pawn with check on G5. So anyway, I went knight G7 here. That was the wrong way to unravel, actually. I needed to play queen D6 here. And let's see, well, we'll look at this. The chess engine explains why. After knight G7, he can play the move rook B1, kicking my queen, and the queen needs to go to A6. Notice that the C7 square is covered by his queen, so I don't have any convenient square to go to that still holds on to the B pawn. And, this is just not such a great square for my queen. It's kind of moving in the wrong direction. And if I ever play b6 to defend, then my queen is totally cut off. Or, yeah, and I can't even play rook b8 because the queen is guarding that square. So this kind of position is awkward for me, I guess. So that's why in this position, the immediate queen d6 is the best way to unravel. But anyway, I unraveled with knight g7, and he played queen f4, putting pressure on my knight. And then I brought my rook over, and he played d6. And that actually is the move that gives the game away. So, I mean, we've been talking about a slight edge for black or a slight edge for white over here, but really both sides could still play on and hold the game. But after d6, it's actually losing. So this was his last chance, and let's go ahead and look at how white should have played it. With g4, let's see, I play something like queen d8 to bring my queen over, defending here, and this is still a little awkward for me. He can play rook b1. I have time for b6 now. Then play a4. The problem is it's hard for me to unwind. His queen is actually sitting on a great square, covering the square in front of the pawn. So it's easy, not so easy for me to blockade that pawn, and it's pretty dangerous. Chess Engine is recommending knight d7, maybe with the idea of setting up a blockade on the light square. Notice that queen d7, trying to blockade with the queen, is not going to work because he's got bishop here. Well, maybe that's not so bad. I guess I would trade off the bishop. Anyway, this was the recommended move. Knight d7, a5, and queen f6, just trying to go into an endgame where I'm a piece up. Queen takes, knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes. And after all of this, we are in that endgame where I'm a piece up. But white has 3 pawns for the piece. And I think white has winning chances, although Chess Engine rates this as even. So anyway, that's the last chance to get an even position for white. After d6, it's actually lost, and this rook e6 is the strongest reply. Although I have to say it was fairly straightforward to just gang up on that pawn. It's you want to push those passed pawns, but you want to do it at the time when they can't be counterattacked or lead to weaknesses. But the pawn, when it was sitting on this square, it was controlling squares around my queen and rook, controlling squares on my side of the board, making it difficult for me to put these pieces to good squares. I mean, if that pawn weren't there, I would like to play a move like rook e6 anyway. So d6, just giving me that square was too much. So I grab it right away. He plays g4. There's no saving the pawn. I take it. And then he just blunders the queen here, but in fact he's losing anyway. There's no way to save the position at this point. So he went bishop b4, I took the queen, and he resigned. So an abrupt end, but I definitely had a winning edge at that point in the game. So anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon.